maybe I just try to like find the most gentle way to be like most powerful. It's
Mhm.
trying to get like as soft as possible and use that as a tactic of expression or survival instead of like clenching. I find try to soften and see how being soft or creating rather than fighting or like yelling, which is I'm a I'm a lover and a fighter for the record.
Mhm. Hello, and welcome to Fuck Yeah. I am one of your hosts, Robin, here with a quick note about this week's episode. We recorded this episode the day before the election. And of course, it was a simpler time when we knew not what was coming before us, but we are with tentative anticipation throughout the episode about it. If you stay until the end of the episode, you will hear some really beautiful ways of using your own creative and artistic expression, your own vulnerability to resist hardening during these really scary, difficult times. Um, Sarah and I will have a whole discussion about this, hopefully next week. Trust that we have plenty to say about what had happened in our country. In the meantime, we are here for you. We love you. We want to hear from you. You can send us DMs or send us an email, um, and just let us know how you're feeling, how you're coping with everything that's going on, any thoughts you have about the election and our collective future. Another addition to this podcast is I do have a new dog and she was being noisy in the background. I apologize. I am trying to figure out how to handle that situation. So hopefully there will be less puppy disruption, but in this one, you might hear a couple barks. I hope it doesn't set off your dogs or alarm anyone. Just imagine the cutest chihuahua you've ever seen. They are lovely, but they are noisy. And don't miss this weekend, Saturday, the 16th, the Failed Film Festival. The Failed Film Festival is happening in Los Angeles and East LA. So check it out on the Failed Film Fest Instagram for all of the details. All right, here's the show. Hello and welcome to Fuck Yeah, the podcast where we say fuck yeah to queer smut. We are here with Failed Films founder Anton Martinez. Is that would you call yourself the founder?
Not the founder, executive producer and curator. I've been a
Uh,
part of it since 2016. It was founded by Chris Holloway and Grace and Jonah up in the Bay Area in 2016. And I've kind of since started co-parenting it since 2018.
I love
Love it.
your language choices. And what a year to start a smutty film collective.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, yeah. It's such a wild time, and I don't know how to do or feel about it.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
Everything
living a little
feels
bit of a 2016 resurgence right now, aren't we?
yeah, yes. Election day is tomorrow. Yeah, yes.
What
Yeah.
a
So
time to be alive.
people listening to this know a lot more than we do right now.
It's true.
So this is the Monday before the election. So
Ooh,
when this
okay.
comes out, y'all, whoever's listening, you are from the future and know a lot more than us. We are still
Wow.
sitting in anticipation mode.
Give me
Ooh,
chills.
not fun.
I'm gonna
sidetrack us for a second because I just wrote an email that I'm not planning on sending until later in the week because I realized like I read the room, right? I'm gonna let us this all settle. But what I did, I'm thinking of it kind of like a spell. I'm on a board of for a nonprofit, and so I wrote it to everybody as if we are coming out on the other side having fought back fascism. So I just wrote the email like that. It's sitting in my drafts. It'll go out later in the week and I'm going to just trust that it's going to be true. Yep.
I mean, is
I
it
hope
still gonna? Is it gonna send regardless of the outcome?
That's a great question. I think I probably would put something at the begin, say we end up in a black hole of despair later in the week. I will probably say, I
Hmm.
wrote this at the beginning of the week with the
Mhm.
highest hopes, and I'm sending it to you anyways.
Yeah.
I think you should definitely send it regardless, because either way, I think it still holds space for forwardness and
Yeah.
Mhm.
keeping that energy going forward.
Yeah. 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 This is the energy I want to put out into the world. So,
Hmm.
along that vein, is anything giving you a fuck yeah right now, Anton?
Oh, but yeah, I think tomorrow during the election day, I'm going to make a film, four failed films, which I have yet to do, and I've just been too fucking busy to work on my own art in
Mm.
anticipation for building a house to house other people's. I'm not complaining at all, but this sounds perfect. So let's just make art on this day. I don't know.
I I think it's a great solution. Is it to you know, like Sarah was saying, fight the fascism. There's nothing like self-expression, to at least keep your mind off
Absolutely,
of it. And
absolutely.
all the powers that we don't have control over, but we do have a lot of self-expression that we can do. So that's
Yeah,
great.
it'll be
That's
nice. I
great.
have like a lot of anxiety around last election year. I had a domestic violence situation, which is
Mm,
I'm like, oh shit, okay. It's I find it kind of coming up in my periphery and kind of going closer and closer to the point of my vision. So I'm trying to regard that. And then the time before that was real nutty. I ended up doing a bunch of drugs and kissing a toilet bowl seat with one of my friends who I was working with at King.com at the time. Yeah, and then I ended up like in a taxi cab, and this guy was deaf, and I ended up hanging out with him at my friend's house, and it wasn't sexual like at all, but I ended up like washing his feet, and like we were
Mm.
like signing all night, and it wasn't sexual like at all. He was straight. I don't know how we got here, but we got here, and then we ended up
right?
like jumping into the ocean. It
Oh,
was, I don't know.
it
So
sounds like a more magical election day than the one that
Yeah.
happened
yeah,
later. Yeah, that's
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
You never know what'll happen on election day.
You know,
Oh.
There was something in your films. So we watched a number of your films before in prep for this conversation. And I
mhm,
have a question kind of generally about how you define the work because I was like going in expecting to, I like had carved out time. I have a kid in my house, so I have to be sort of mindful about when I'm going to watch smutty things. And, I was like, "Okay, I'm sitting down to watch some porn," and then it ended up being so much more cinematic and, um, sort of, a visionary, almost psychedelic experience
Mhm.
in some of them,
well,
but there was a form also of resistance that really came through, like a resistance to the format almost.
Mhm.
Where it made me think about, I have known people who have had friends who've made porn, and I know a number of people who really stepped back from it in California
mhm,
specifically
yeah.
when all of the regulation became so much more punitive,
Pasta
really.
Cesta.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you, Kamala. Kamala. Anyway, sorry, that's a side swipe. We
Yeah.
need to work on that. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's, it became really dangerous to be making erotica and erotic films and porn, and so to see your work, and I actually watched a number of the, other collaborators that you work with because
Great.
I just kinda went down a rabbit hole and was so excited
I
by
love it.
it. Um, it felt like that when art is happening in a really restrictive environment,
Hmm.
it has to get more innovative in terms of how you're telling your stories. So I was watching it through the lens of knowing that it can be really dangerous to make porn,
Yeah.
and then seeing the ways that you all are visually representing erotic experiences is so incredibly creative and expansive despite all of the regulation. So I don't know that that like came I have so many ideas kind of bubbling over, but
Hmm.
I'm curious about the format specifically and what it means to you all, cuz to me it just felt really expansive.
I love what you're saying. We the whole like as far as like my filmmaking approach goes, I'm like, well, I just need shoestrings and bubble gums, and let's make something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like we encourage our artists to, no matter their quote unquote talent level or accessibility level to equipment and tools, if you have less than, then we encourage you even more to do so. So if
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like lighting, I'm like, get an old camera or get an old iPhone and fucking get some light bulbs and try it out, see what happens. Like that's kind of the center. But I think I'm glad it kind of came across as something like more spiritual or more emotional for you,
Mhm.
because I think at that point and still at this point, we don't have a lot of tools or support emotionally, funding, community respect to acclimate accordingly and to thrive. So I think there we are in a deficit of resources, emotional resources, and we're using the resources that we got. A lot of times it's each other and ourselves, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad to see that that is translating over. Yeah, I loved your how you framed that.
What makes a failed film? Like, what's the criteria?
Mm.
And also, we should mention that there's a failed film festival coming up, the Triple
Yes.
F. And that's on, what was it, the 14th?
November 16th.
November 16th. So on November
Yes.
16th. And I would love for you to talk. You told me a little bit about what it's going to be like. So, because it's not just like a screening or anything. But before I get too far ahead, see, I'm already asking
Sure.
you 5 questions. What makes a failed film like to be grouped with these other films? What's the criteria?
I don't think there's necessarily a specific criteria. I think it's kind of like creating too much boundaries, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe inhibits um
Mm.
somebody can potentially come through with. Um, However, as we get further and further into our seasons, we're on season 7 now. We're finding that limitations are a lot more. Our limitations happen to be we're getting more restrictive on time, just because we want to
Mm.
feature as many artists, and we somehow become kind of like a global film festival. It's amazing, and we
Mm.
like to house as many artists as we can. So going forward, I think the most limiting thing right now is going to be time. Maybe we need films that are under 15, 12 minutes, 10 minutes, because then we can fill our walls with more artists. So as far as that, that would be our biggest limitation. But kind of anything applies. I mean, the obvious stuff is like we don't no minorities can be if there's like somebody children and we
Right.
scrap it. So the obvious things. But I mean, it's kind of fair game. We've had some. It's it's interesting to watch the seasons progress because I mean during the like the pandemic season, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of suicide, a lot of
Wow.
self harm, a lot of abuse, a lot of there it was just dark. It was definitely it was haunting. It was really fucking heavy.
Wow.
Mhm.
And I mean it's kind of nice. I feel like we could get a temperature check on queer artists around the world by
Right.
having watching what comes in, and happy to say that as far as like the submissions we got this year, it's very sprightly and a bunch of group fun and a bunch of
Mm.
spaghetti and robot-y AI sort of sexual minds. Yeah, really playful. So we have that going for us this year.
Does it always have the element of sexuality and queerness, though, or is that not necessarily part of it?
It's not necessarily part of it, but that's just kind of it's almost inherent. It's kind of just like second nature. I mean,
Okay.
any one person can do this. And maybe it's somebody's first time exploring their queerness, and I think kind of maybe seeing themselves in that queerness. So we don't like to eh, what somebody comes to the table with is part of what it is, and that's why it's the shape is continually changing because every new ingredient, every new person, it takes on a different form. So it's this ever evolving body of work that is made up of all of our bodies of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
And the
interesting.
festival is coming up. So, what does the festival entail?
The festival entails it's a non-traditional film and art festival, which is to say you just don't come into a movie theater and sit in a seat. Um, there's multiple screens. There's interactive, experiential films and art. We're gonna have lap dances. We have vendors, tarot, tattoos,
Mm.
um, unconventional ways to witness and experience film and art. So, I mean, you could sit and focus. We have like two bigger screens, one inside and one outside, and then we have stuff going on in between. Yeah, so it's the way one receives and witnesses is also up to them how to do it. So we want to give people options on how they participate, ingest, and digest, and share the work that's at hand.
Hmm.
It's so interesting to me because it's so like the at least the films that we watched of yours has, like Sarah was saying, this kind of psychedelic-ish dreamscape kind of vibe to it that it sounds like the presentation of the films also has. And it's so much about like the experience of the viewer in addition to what you want them to visually experience. It's how they choose to move through the space and experience what they want as well.
Yeah,
It's great.
we want our audience to have the freedom to kind of like they choose your own adventure. Kind of you have some participation in the way you are experiencing these films and pieces of art.
Okay. I
I
want to talk about these films. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. I was just looking up the title of the very first one that I saw because I was trying to remember, and of course now my phone is playing.
It was
Um,
I watched Collage
yes, I
Lost
first.
watched
Daydream.
Collage
Collage
Daydream.
Daydream. Yes. Okay,
Hmm.
so first of all, it's like Parliaments and Birkenstocks make an appearance within like the first minute, and I'm like, okay, well, this is my college experience right
Yeah.
here. Like,
I wrote down, remember smoking?
remember
Like I smoke a lot of weed,
this?
but remember fucking parliaments? And I was like, yeah, okay. And I know some of us still actively smoke and everything, but for me, I was like, oh God,
I
I
smoke
remember those
parliaments.
Oh,
hollow filters.
it was something like so visceral, like it brought me into it instantly. And then it's this also like paper cutting, Parliaments, and Birkenstocks. Like there we
Hmm.
go. Like this is my college life right here.
Hmm.
And there's this like immersive quality where the collage takes over and now you're in this fantasy space. And it
Hmm.
was so cool because again, like I'm sitting down kind of not knowing exactly what I'm about to watch. And it was the narrative quality of it was very much, I won't say implied, but it wasn't overwrought with narrative. Like you were able to just go on this kind of textural, as visually beautiful journey that just had a lot of feeling in it. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like the story was the most important element, which I think is a part of eroticism that is so beautiful that often can get missed when we're telling stories that have eroticism at the center. You know, you're like, oh, I'm trying to tell a story here. And this was just being part of an experience that was
Yeah, yeah,
tactile and beautiful.
It felt like
yeah.
to me like if I was going to define the story is that there's a person is fantasizing about the person that is in the magazine that they're making the collage of. But then
Hmm.
there's also this intertwining between I mean, the scissoring part I thought was very clever, and it made me laugh a little bit. Like it was such a nice visual between like the scissors cutting out and then the scissors on the legs and then the actual
Hmm.
scissoring.
Right.
But there's a lot of like kind of twinning between the two characters. So the person that's being fantasized about and the person who's doing the fantasy and their interaction together. I don't, and like there's this objectification that's a little bit inherent in fantasizing about someone who's in a magazine and then cutting
Hmm.
their body out and
Yeah.
then you know, placing them and then covering yourself in the collage and everything. But there's in all of the films I feel like a withdrawal from this classic kind of objectification that we're used to seeing in porn, even a lot of queer porn, where you're like, I'm the sexy one and you want to be with me. And then the person who is wanting to be with them often is less sexualized or it's about their desire. But there is a
Hmm.
real like interaction between they were kind of the same. Like there was a point where they were kind of doing a peep show for each other, you know, like
Right.
if on the other side of the glass of the peep show is another dancer. And I was like, yeah, no, it just
Yeah.
like hit so hard. I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating hearing people's uh version of the story for them.
Yeah. What's your version of that story? And
Uh, my version of the story. Yeah, maybe to like start where I'm going to start. Yeah, I think as far as like when I make films, within this nature, I'm not specifically setting out to turn people on. I
mhm.
think there's something about me specifically. I've always kind of been, I haven't really leaned into shock value. It's not my thing, or at least how I make work. I don't set out to shock people. However, like I think in my life, I kind of naturally have some error that I'm shocking to people, and
Mhm.
those are two different things. So when I set out, I'm not trying to like the spirit of sexuality is more dominant to me than showing sex or showing trying to make people horny. I personally don't care about that. But it's fucking great if you do. Not knocking anybody else. But I think that contributes to how I participate in making this sort of work. But this film for me is Lauren West. She is my best friend, and she's also co executive producer and curator of Phil Films. When I moved to LA, I was having a really hard time, and she was helping me financially and emotionally, and I didn't have a lot to give back to her. And she's a collage artist.
Hmm.
So it's a love letter to her about
Mm.
her practices and her art, and I told my version of her story doing her craft.
What was so interesting to me about seeing all three of the films of your films back to back is by the end of it, I was to myself, I was like, what the hell is Antone's sexuality?
Oh.
And it made me realize that how much of the creator's sexuality tends to go into films that have sexual content in them, you know, or how much the viewer's sexuality is involved in the content of the film and catered to and stuff like that. And I think this like gets into the lack um of of objectification within the films is because it's not there, like you're saying, to turn someone on. It's a film about um like you're saying, like a love letter to your friend, but it involves sexuality
Yeah,
within that. But it's not like you're sexualizing your friend necessarily from behind the camera, you know,
right.
going like, oh, yes, this is so hot. This is going to be great. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't, and it's such a nice way to see sexuality on film because we hardly ever see it that way. Even if it's like a, R-rated film or something, often it's so much about turning on a certain type of person, you know?
Yes, yeah, that shock value that's very pointed.
And also the
Um,
male gaze element, I think.
That's exactly
yeah,
I think that's the word I wasn't saying out loud is the male gaze element.
yeah, totally. I love that you guys are touching on this because Lauren's work specifically, if you watch some of her own films, that she's been directing, and also her collage work, she speaks a lot about subverting the male gaze. So she's almost
Mhm.
to take these stories and turn it into her, like, her story. So she kind of like strips it of the male gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you can see that in the way that the two people present themselves in this like we have some glitter, we have some makeup, we also have hairy armpits and just like a way of sitting with oneself that is so different from that performative sexuality.
yeah.
And I loved it.
It's
Yeah.
it's very true to. I would like to think it's very true to both participating artists that I shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like this movement. I mean, I have intimacy coordination is very much rooted in it's like a practice that is about centering the performer, but you're placing it within a film industry that's so like dependent on hierarchy. And so the
Hmm.
Mhm.
role of the intimacy coordinator is also to make sure that the director's vision comes through. And it's almost like your films that I saw have this quality of, okay, well, then what if you actually strip that top layer out of it and it becomes really centered in the work stemming from the performers and the collaborators
Mhm.
rather than this dominating vision with a very strict script, right? Like it just
Right.
feels like there's a lot of room to play within your projects. Is that how you
Yeah.
approach it?
That, that's the hope. Yeah.
Yeah, it shows. It really shows.
Good.
Is
Nice.
is there a place where people can see these films that we're referencing before we get too deep into it, or are they not in public
I have a
viewing?
Vimeo that I have not fucking touched in years with maybe a
Okay.
few of my films on there. I know Filled Films has a Vimeo as well. That has a roster, a catalog of some of our artists from the past. That's definitely worth clicking some buttons and getting into. Some real beautiful, colorful, very strange work
Okay.
here.
Awesome. Awesome. All
And
right.
going to the festival in on November 16th.
Yes.
You guys are
Yes.
going?
I'll be able to go. I'm going to go.
Yes. Amazing.
And are you still accepting submissions?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Um,
It's like a legit.
um, yeah. But I'm sure once this season is over, I think we're maybe planning on keeping submissions open so we could just kind of keep it rolling.
Keep it flowing. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk about yolk? Yolk? Yolk?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Breaking yoke.
I had to look away a couple moments
Good.
because I
Dude, I have a lot of like food. Thank God there wasn't like the sound um,
Yeah.
of the yolkage, but so it's like it is visually like there are moments that are a lot to take in. I think visually because it's a lot of like it felt like a fetish film, but again,
Hmm.
somehow not objectifying the people, which was
Yeah.
like amazing to me. I was like, I don't like fetish plus a lack of objectification just was so interesting to me. So there's a lot of like spreading yolks on the body. You guys, it's you and another person, a woman who has you guys have yellowish latex shirts on
Hmm.
and just playing with these yolks to like no end, in a lot of different ways that are like sometimes overtly sexual, but a lot of just I think seeing what is even like capable, what's possible with this material. And a lot of times like the color would almost turn into this greenish
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
instead of
yeah,
the yellow, and like a neon green almost.
totally.
And oh, okay, so this is what I wrote down. I wrote gross but beautiful, fetish but not objectifying, um, cosmic slash universal but very human. Um, and it's like at the core. So I mean, the yolk itself being like this large ovum has
Mhm.
everything to do with sexuality, and then the viscosity and just the like, the cumminess of it, the just all of the like it's like fluids
of sexuality, literally. The underwater stuff of like pushing it out and sucking it back in and having these plumes of this amniotic fluid kind of thing. It just felt so at its core of sexuality. But then, like I'm saying, it's like this contradiction because then you're also like doing these kind of like really fetishy things that
Mhm.
feel extracted. Like fetish to me has always felt like if you take, like, it's a very human thing to take something like fucking or reproduction or whatever and just pull it. It's like pulling taffy as far away from that original source as you can get. But then using the egg just like slaps it right back into that literalness of sexual reproduction for
Yeah,
me.
quite literal.
So it just felt like teasing out all of these concepts with these seemingly contradictory ideas. And there's no like where, I mean, maybe there's like an audio at a certain point of spoken, but I don't think that it's just like just all of these visuals. I was like, it's at the same time it gives you a visceral reaction. Like I
Yeah.
loved the imagery and also being like, "Whoa," you know.
Hmm.
I thought it was great.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you
is that hitting it on the head of as far as what you were looking to do, or what was your goal with this?
I don't think I'm ever specifically looking to do anything other than to maybe um, share a dream. But people's, I could, it's like when we make something, a film or something, that's the closest we could get to showing somebody a dream when we fall asleep. And I think that's really sacred and special. Dreams are open to interpretation. So if I tell you guys a dream that I had last
Mhm.
night, you're gonna find what you know to be or not to be, and create that story with me.
Yeah.
More specifically, this was made for Failed Films' very first season,
Mm.
2016. So I had like made films with my friends, but never like given an opportunity to show it, to put it on a wall or to have it like bear witness in like a more like format sense. So this is me really coming out of my shell. So I kind of just worked on all these things, and the first time I ever got my heart broken, my friend told me this quote from the Bible. It's about being equally yoked, and the whole time I thought she was talking about eggs. She was talking about the yolks around
Right.
cattle where they churn the land, and I found that out later. And then just thinking about all these metaphors in my life is just like always getting like egged on, or I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't know to put my
Mm.
eggs in a basket. What came first, the
Mhm.
chicken or the egg?
Mhm.
Just sitting, not knowing like I don't know, not knowing if these eggs are fertile. If I'm sitting on them, I'm like, am I sitting on the wrong dream? Am I sitting on the wrong
Mm.
thing? Am I keeping something that's not growing anything? Is not to say that it's dead, but it's it's not
Unfertilized.
unfertilized. So like it just, I mean, all these things still stand for me, and sometimes we do sit on things that are not fertilized, and I don't know. Yeah, there's so much there. So I, with all of that, I tried to tell the story of like heartbreak or art and making and fostering and maybe even fertilizing, finding a way to fertilize myself. And more recently, I
Mm.
started dating this guy and had this like really big epiphany because this whole time I was just like, fuck, how am I supposed to find out if I'm equally yoked with somebody if we're both not broken? And
Mm.
then I think I like came to this thing and I was like, oh well, then we could just like fertilize each other's eggs or fertilize the egg and like give it life instead of like breaking it. We could like somehow infuse a corresponding part that actually helps it evolve. So it's been nice to have all these. The art. This is what I'm. Maybe this is me as a film's curator or somebody who gets people to rally. It's like y'all, when you make something, it really like creates space for growth and evolution in your life, and it's like a marker in time, and you always go back to it, and you're always learning from what you make, even if it's like quote unquote, it's not about right or wrong. You're always going to be learning from the art you make, and like that's the biggest way that we could be our own teachers is to make our art because that's how we could teach ourselves by continually because it doesn't you grow with it, it moves you. When you create art creates you. It's like you talking, I don't know. So this is
Yes.
anybody listening out there, please do yourself a favor and do the rest of the world a favor and make your body of work. It's amazing how it helps you evolve.
I couldn't love that anymore. That's so beautiful.
It
It's so
is so
true.
beautiful. And it also speaks to like an experience that I had watching a number of your films. And then we've got Late Bloomer. So now I'm very
Mhm.
curious about when you made that in relationship to Broken Yoke, I think.
Breaking yoke.
Breaking Yoke. Because I was then like, oh my gosh, okay, what do eggs mean to Antone? Because there is this
Right.
moment in Late Bloomer where I was, gosh, I mean, the ecosexuals out there like absolutely need to watch this piece because
Yes.
you're working the land and you start there's like this fisting moment with the
Mhm.
dirt, which I have to, I mean, I'm a gardener, and so I love dirt so much. Like, I don't feel sexual towards it, but there is an experience that I really love about working in dirt. So it was
Hmm.
very satisfying to watch. And then you do fertilize an egg, essentially,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it takes you like we definitely go into a psychedelic space, but the arc of that film was so unexpected to me
Mhm.
because the thing that grows out of this fertilization is this beautiful sort of hybrid extreme sized plant. And then you
Hmm.
go on this journey through, I think it was Echo Park,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and you end up at the home of someone, and then there's this beautiful scene between you two where you gift to the plant. Like, it felt very internal. So then to see you take this beautiful creation that you've made, gift it, and then have this very sensual exchange with the person at the end, I was like, okay, there's definitely like these two pieces feel to me like they're in conversation with each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And
um
what you were talking about just a moment ago, I mean, it does seem like the story of this of this film where because you also have a dream sequence. I think it's a dream sequence where your face is covered in thorns and you're
yeah.
walking through the desert and you're like desperate and so that whole idea of being able to fertilize each other's yolks and
Mhm.
grow something is so beautiful. It's just, and also
Yeah.
your outfit when you're walking through Echo Park, your green pants and your
Oh, thank you.
lacy flower shirt. I was like, I see that.
Thanks.
I see it. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that story is also made out of turmoil. I was shooting adult content in Spain for a couple months, and I was working with this pretty well-known performer. Uh, and we did this negotiation where she paid me very little in return that she's going to give me an RV that I was going to live in because we were working. I moved from San Francisco with King.com. We were out there shooting for King.com, and
Mm.
this is my plan to get back. It turns out when I came back, this RV was non-operative, barely started, and then she just decided to stop talking to me. And I was like, oh wow, this really sucks.
Nice.
Now I'm
Yeah.
fucking homeless. Spent a summer in the back of this RV with me and my dog, and just really like fucking struggling. was like, fuck, I totally got hat. I was like, this
Yeah.
Dom definitely fucking she won. Really
Aw.
devastated because she was a very special person to me, but yeah, you win, you lose. So I was like, how do I fucking make something of this? And I was like, well, let's just turn this. I parked it in my friend's backyard, and then I ended up moving into that house just by happenstance. A couple months, a room in that house opened up, so that it was parked back there. So I decided to make this a garden. I was like, oh, let's grow where something once hurt. Let's give this thing life. Let's
Mm.
plant a garden in here. This pain. And then I was dating, this is my ex-boyfriend who I was dating at the time. I was like, oh yeah, I found like this golden egg. I found like my person.
Mm.
So it became like a love letter to him while like healing from this and just, just trying to grow something to give to somebody. My mom actually helped me shoot that. I went back to New Mexico and she helped me
Aw.
like do some of my makeup and camera work when we were in White Sands, which was really fun to bring my mom on board because she knows what I do. And I don't only do like quote porn sex stuff. I do more quote unquote conventional mainstream stuff. But yeah, it was just really cool explaining the project to her, and she's like, "Wow, that's like really interesting." She's like a Latina Catholic woman, so she's not like a super woody woo art person that one might think. Um,
But Catholics love symbolism. I mean,
yeah,
they have an
we sure as
understanding
fuck
of
do.
symbolism. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was I just again making turning something that hurt into something that's growing and a love letter to my ex and so many things at once.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. It's just so interesting how to watch films that are not only about sexuality but have that element of sexuality in it and just have no idea where it's going to go. There's no formula to it. It has so many visual elements in it that are really engaging. And like I know it's not made necessarily to be like jerk off material,
Hmm.
but when watching them, like I've done a lot of work in the past couple years around deconstructing my misogynistic fantasies,
Hmm.
and because they were all misogynistic, and I've gotten myself into a space now where I will masturbate for pleasure's sake without
Hmm.
any kind of storyline involved. And there's not a lot, like I've tried to be like, all right, well, maybe like what kind of porn am I going to be into? And I've tried looking around and nothing like hits it for me. But watching these, I was like, this is the kind of thing I think I could masturbate to now, where
Cool.
it's
Yeah.
like visually engaging
Mm-hmm.
and could also like, it's anti-formulaic, it's anti-objectification. It's not telling me what to think or be aroused by. And that's like where I'm at right now. So it's
That sounds
so
like a beautiful place to be.
or you could just watch them, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be this thing that's always about like, all right, how am I gonna orgasm today? Um
Right.
which it can be with porn, so like prescriptive in this way, and
Sure.
then your sexuality becomes this prescriptive like
Yeah.
formula, and you're like, ugh.
I, I like to say that my films are closest to maybe like adult fairy tales or like fables. They're like
Mm-hmm.
small micro grown up fairy tales,
Yeah,
kind
I love
of.
that. I
There's
love it.
also just this intersection, your artistry certainly comes through. You're
Mm-hmm.
bringing a lot of as you're describing your personal narratives and how they're showing up in the art. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, this is, we live in a town where art has been truly commodified, right? Art
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
craft. And this is a place in the world where you can come and sort of make top dollar for your quote unquote art. But you have to mold it into the ultimate vision of somebody else who's then also probably ruled by a big corporation, right?
Yeah.
So what we consume a lot of content now in our day-to-day lives, but we don't consume a lot of art, which is
Yeah.
really just about giving voice to the creative process. And that's
Yeah.
what was so interesting about watching these films is I was like, oh, this is not beholden to you're recognizing the viewer, but you're not
Mhm.
trying to sell it to the viewer.
Right.
It's very
No.
much about letting this creativity just pour out of you.
Mhm.
Yeah, the influence of capitalism on art is really, really damaging, and
Mhm.
it just sucks. It's like it's really hard. I've been to see so many brilliant artists just struggle so much, or having to like not make art because they can't afford to, or they can't carve out the.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have enough luxury of money to actually create the time to actually just put away, because yeah, I could
Yeah.
talk a lot about how devastating it is that art is just yeah, the way it's stripped of its kind of heart oftentimes these days.
But as you're describing that, I think that we also have this added layer, the stage of capitalism that we're in where
Mhm.
everything is profit oriented
Hmm.
ultimately results in this housing crisis that we're living
Right.
under. So you used to be able to find pockets of the world where you could
Mhm.
go and live as an artist. And
Right.
those are just shrinking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's impossible to make art in a context where you're having to be constantly productive just to survive. And I
Mhm.
think that this comes up a lot in our conversations, that it really does feel like it is sort of part of this dominant culture desire to suppress our creativity, our queerness, all of these things, because it doesn't ultimately serve capitalism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Being an artist comes with sacrifice.
Mhm.
But to sacrifice being an artist is what's happening now. You know what I
Right.
mean? There's like a double sacrificing, and if you're already fucking down, like it's just fucking hard.
Yeah. It's part of what I love about your idea for election day is that you're going to make a film. Not that it's necessarily just about that, but it's a great way to, fight the powers if you can. Take some
Yeah,
time for
yeah,
self-expression.
totally. It's one of the biggest forms of resistance is
Yeah.
making art.
Yeah, and
And it
art's
doesn't
always
even
played
have to be
such
made to be resistant, but just doing it is, you know,
is resistance.
Yes.
Yes. And art's played such a huge role in resistance movements always. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love that. So, as you go into tomorrow, I'm curious a little bit about your process. Do you know what is coming out of tomorrow, or do you how do you approach it? How are you doing it?
I have a couple loose visions. Um, I very influenced by this person, this guy I'm seeing. Yeah, I just like walking around with him, and he'll just like loves to point out beautiful things. And I remember before dating, I was like, I just want to be with somebody I could just like walk around with and just like be like, look at that flower, look at that color, look at that thing. He's always doing this. So I was like, I like would really like to make like something beautiful, and I was like looking for something beautiful to make, and I was like, okay, I have these visuals, I have these jars of butterflies that I collected years ago in New Mexico, and I've always kept them in a jar. They're, I don't know if you could see it. Anyway, they're right behind me up there.
mhm.
I was like, this is an ingredient for my art. I don't know how it's going to come out, but I know that that's part of it. And I was like, okay, let's make something beautiful. What am I going to make that's beautiful? And I was like, oh my god, let's just make something beautiful. Like, we don't know what that thing might be.
Mhm.
The fact is, like, the piece of work is going to be called something beautiful.
Ah,
Mm.
So instead of trying to find something to look at, we create something beautiful. What I'm going to make is going to be beautiful. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like I just have to do it to fulfill that. What I'm gonna do, I don't know. I have a couple loose ideas. I have this like spinning wheel where I want to get maybe somebody on and just turning, and then have their face turn into somebody else. It doesn't have to be. I was thinking really big, and I was like, if I need to get this done in a day, let's just put somebody on this spinning wheel and then have them, like, when we edit it, turn into another face or another person, or it could just be their finger spinning in slow motion, or just like just the shape. We're just gonna fucking create something beautiful, like,
Yeah.
and that's the goal. What it's gonna be, I don't know, but it's gonna be something beautiful.
And how accessible beauty is, you know.
Yes, this is another thing. Thank you for bringing that up, because this is something I've been talking with Nate a lot about. Is I was like thinking about, and this is actually perfect. Now it's kind of coming together. I love how this starts to happen. The more you do, the more like you figure out, you solve your
Yep.
riddles and stuff. But so like I went on this big thing with him, and I was like, beauty is neither good or it's not good or evil. It's beauty is neutral, because something can be
Mhm.
evil and beautiful. We could take
Mhm.
something beautiful, and something evil can still, they could use beauty to be a part of it.
Mhm.
Something could be good and use beauty. So beauty is not something, it's very neutral. It's all encompassing. Anything can be beautiful. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is. And I love that
Yeah.
that beauty is everywhere, not only in the good spots but in the bad spots. And that's where it can become really dangerous for ourselves and other people, in the way we wield and showcase beauty, or honor
Mhm.
it, or showcase it, or explore it. It says a lot about your nature, because it's like you're gonna find things beautiful, and
Yep.
you want to be beautiful, even if it's a grotesque sort of beauty. You guys know what I mean? It's just fucking
Yeah.
beauty's
100%.
everywhere. It's like,
Yes.
and I love that. It's like, I don't think I've ever like come to this spot of like realizing that beauty is neutral,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that's
that is
really powerful to
interesting.
me.
Yeah. It's neutral and in the eye of the beholder, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like when Sarah's talking about loving dirt, you know,
Mm.
or
Hmm.
the way that we were talking about the yolk, breaking yolk, where it's like it's gross and then it's really beautiful also,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and it's about are you open to the beauty of something, has a lot to do with it as well. If you can even see it, because then we're also told that beauty has certain things, like you think of like the beauty standard or whatever,
Sure.
and how
Yeah,
it leaves
exactly.
out so much beauty in the world. And then those beautiful people might think that they're not worthy
Yeah.
of beauty or something. And you're just, it's
Yeah.
so maddening, you know?
Yeah, beauty
Um,
is easy to weaponize. It's like very,
yeah.
very, very fucking easy to weaponize and target
Yes.
people to make them feel like they are not,
Yeah.
they're something other than beautiful.
Yeah, and that feels bad because we know deep down that it's not fucking true. You
Right.
know, it's like you are a living creature on this earth. Like it's insanely beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah,
But yeah, like you're saying, it is like it just is. You know, it
it
doesn't
just
mean that it's
fucking
good or
is.
bad. It just is, and we get
It
to
just is.
experience it. It's like what a joy to be with all that is. Oh my god.
Yeah, or even experiencing something so beautiful, it's like really painful sometimes too, to like let go of certain
Yes.
things that are beautiful. You're like, oh, that was so beautiful, but it's fucking harmful. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
there's so many fucking realities that beauty,
Yeah.
and beauty is in all of them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and there is this element of I'm trying to kind of draw the thread here, tie it together, and I'm not quite sure how it's working in my mind, but the commodification of beauty,
Mm.
the commodification of art, and this
Mhm.
idea of your practice tomorrow to get through election day is to go and make art that is calling to you about beauty just
Mhm.
feels like a subversion of all of that, right? It's radical and it's yeah, subversive, I guess is the best word I have for it.
Yeah, it's like maybe I just try to like find the most gentle way to be, um like most powerful. You know, it's
Mhm.
trying to get like as soft as possible and use that as a tactic of expression or survival, instead of like clenching. I find try to soften and see how being soft or creating rather than fighting or like yelling, which is I'm a I'm a lover and a fighter, for the record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but just trying to continually soften. I don't know. I don't know the point I'm trying to make here.
I do think that there's something interesting about that though, because when we harden around the world, it means that the way that we show up for ourselves and for our loved ones, like it can taint everything.
Yeah.
So being able to
Yeah,
continually stay open, be vulnerable, be soft, that is something that people are trying to take from us right now.
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. And I don't think it ultimately serves us in the grander sense of, our well being, our being able to stay embodied and present and going after our passions. Those things require you to have a certain level of vulnerability. And when it
Mm-hmm.
becomes
yes,
too hard to do that, then you just give up that essential aspect of your humanity and you're like, fine, I'll just be a cog in this,
yeah,
productivity
dude,
capitalism wheel.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This kind of maybe it's like what I was maybe not so. I didn't say it as well as you just did about like being an artist. Like you already have to sacrifice, and you have to sacrifice more. There's so many times where I'm just like, fuck it, I don't want to do this. Like I just need to find a way to make money right now because I'm fucking hungry,
Mm-hmm.
and I need rent, money,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the trick of it, is to kind of keep us scared, keep us dehumanized. And that's part of the trick, I think, of commodifying beauty, commodifying basic needs like shelter and food and all of this stuff, so that they keep you busy enough that you're not empowered by this free thinking of, like, you're getting down to the core of what humanity is, like what it means to be a creature on this earth, and
Mhm.
just looking around, like, yes, there is beauty everywhere. All of this stuff with the election and everything, it's such an incredible distraction from, like, actually just living your authentic life, you
Yeah,
know?
and it's hard to like enjoy bearing witness to beauty if you're struggling so much. It's very
Right.
often that you're not gonna your the beauty is taken away from you because you're just working so hard to get by that you don't. But to like be in despair and see beauty, that's a real strong character
Mm-hmm.
attribute that I think we all have. And I got the chills. I think saying that out loud, maybe that's all something we could like find in ourselves, is finding beauty, especially when we're under such turmoil, and like developing that part of our character that we all have. I think that, that in itself something beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just making me think of actually what the power of artists is, right? Because art does require you to give a lot of yourself to keep the channel open, to have a certain level of like shadow exploration and allowing creative flow and all of these things. And and to do it in an environment that is so difficult right now
Mm-hmm.
for queer people, for artists, for people of color, for women. I mean, it's just thank you for staying soft and continuing to share this work with us, because it is really beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
I was so pleasantly surprised by everything that I saw. And it's there are cultures that have really embraced the arts and what they
Hmm.
have to teach us and to show us about our humanity and like the larger kind of purpose of our being here on this planet at this point in time. And we are not living right now in a culture that really values that. So it's hard work, but I really
Yeah,
enjoyed getting to go on those journeys with you in the films and with your performers, and was just like, oh, yeah, this gives you kind of a different perspective when you're watching something that is not oriented towards a I guess I'm just kind of repeating something I said earlier, but just like a lot of the content that we are constantly fed these days is very much about taking you on this kind of uh, peak experience, right?
Mhm.
Of like, okay, we're going to manipulate your feelings
Mhm.
so that you either want to click to the next episode
Mhm.
or, you know, we've got you hooked to sell you this thing. Like it's like this kind of constant ride that you're taking on that's so crafted in terms of like what they want the audience experience to be. So to
Yeah.
just enjoy these more immersive stories that were for me much more kind of ephemeral was really
Mhm.
interesting. I don't see a lot of art like that anymore. So thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you. I mean, go for it.
well, I just wanted to pinpoint the thing that you said earlier about figuring out your own riddles. And
Mhm.
I love that so much. I'm going to take that with me from this, partly because it is like what we were talking about, what you're saying, Sarah, with the curiosity and the vulnerability. To be curious even about what you're desiring to make and how it works with you over the years as almost like this visual diary of where you were at that time and how you're in a different spot now, and what this riddle that you created before is not only for the viewer to try to kind of decipher, but also for you to decipher.
Yeah.
It's a really makes it such an organic living thing, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Thank you guys. I feel like we have this like saying, obviously it takes like a village to
Mm-hmm.
raise children, but it takes a village to raise adults. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just nice to kind of find people in our practice, and we help raise each other as artists and community members, and it's lovely. So I really appreciate what y'all are doing. I had a really wonderful time listening to the live podcast at the Eagle. I was fucking crying. I was like, this is, yeah, hearts, lots and lots of appreciation for y'all.
Thank you. And and we want the village to come to the Failed Films Fest
Yes,
on the
we do.
16th of November. Where's it going to be
Yeah.
at?
It's at Media Pollution. Media Pollution does these really rad visual installations for many, many different events. It's in East
Awesome.
LA. Yeah.
And
I
how
think
can
that
people find you and Failed Films?
Failed Films, our Instagram is at Failed Films Fest. And then you could click some buttons and find out website and inquire that away. My Instagram is at Antone Eggs, ANTONEGGS.
There's a theme here.
There's a little
Yeah.
bit.
I
And
love
I'm
it.
assuming if people want to contribute as artists to the Failed Film Fest community, all of that info is on Failed Films page.
Yeah, right now it says submissions are closed, but don't be afraid to email us. It has our email address on our various website and Instagrams. Or drop us a DM on our Instagram, and yeah, we're here together, and we're here to do what we're doing. That sounds silly, but
It's true.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you
Yeah,
both.
excited to see your upcoming film at the festival.
Oh
Yep.
God,
It
I'm
better
like,
be
fuck.
beautiful.
I fucking should have said anything, because if I don't, now the pressure's really on. I really fucking
Right?
put myself in the hot seat. I'm like, fuck, what if I don't make this? I'm like, now you have to make it, you asshole. You just fucking told everybody you're gonna make it.
It
So
better be
here we are.
beautiful. That's all I can
Whenever
say.
it gets
Okay,
released
deal.
into the world, we are excited to see
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Fiercely Independent Media. Fuck Yeah Podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by Robin Jennings and Sarah Tom Cheston, also known as my mom. Theme music by Suno AI. Your support means a lot. You can give to the show and receive perks at patreon.com/fuckyeahpod. You can also rate and review the show or share it with a friend. You can reach us at fyapod@gmail.com. Bye for now.